All right, let's start. Number 10. The Penitence Circuit. In 1119, the Bishop of Orléans commissioned a floor labyrinth inside the cathedral as a substitute pilgrimage route, a sacred path for penitents unable to make the journey to Jerusalem. Within 3 years, 6 pilgrims who entered the circuit alone were reported missing from the church entirely. No witnesses, no bodies, no departures anyone could account for. Floor labyrinths were among the most deliberate and expensive features a medieval cathedral could contain. They were unicursal, meaning a single winding path with no false turns, designed to be walked in contemplation, not to disorient. The Orléans labyrinth followed standard Chartres-type construction, approximately 12 meters in diameter, set into the nave floor where it would catch the morning light. It was a spiritual tool. It was supposed to be safe. What the diocesan records preserved at the Archives départementales du Loiret describe instead is a chapter in a state of quiet panic. The missing pilgrims had entered during daylight in a church that was not empty. Nobody saw them leave. The chapter of Orléans ordered the labyrinth removed in 1122, just 3 years after its installation, which was almost without precedent. Cathedral labyrinths were permanent features. They cost a significant portion of a building budget. You did not tear one up after 3 years unless you had a very serious reason. A marginal notation in the chronicle record states that the removal was conducted at night. No explanation accompanies that detail. The stone was taken out, the floor was relaid, and the chapter recorded nothing further on the subject. If the answer was simply that the pilgrims had wandered out and never returned home, why did they destroy the floor in the middle of the night? Number 9. The Spike Trap. In 1283, the Lord of Brezé extended his castle's underground network of galleries into what the estate steward's household accounts call le chemin tournant, the turning path. Château de Brezé in Anjou sits above one of the deepest domestic troglodyte tunnel systems in France, cut 7 meters into the living tuff rock beneath the castle. The turning path was not the first tunnel. It was the last one the Lord would permit anyone to enter freely. The household accounts for this period record an expenditure on iron points. Spikes, installed in the lower gallery of the turning path. Defensive ironwork was common in medieval fortifications, but it appeared at entrances and gates facing outward. The spikes at Brezé were positioned at the center of the passage, deep inside the rock, facing inward. 3 workers died during the construction of the lower section. A 4th man, described in the accounts as an inspector sent to examine the completed gallery, went in and was not thereafter seen. The Lord sealed the lower section by his own instruction before the feast of St. Michael, the same year the inspector vanished. No reason for the sealing is recorded beyond a single phrase, that the path had served its purpose. During 19th century archaeological investigations of the castle's extensive subterranean complex, the sealed lower section was rediscovered. The iron spike mechanism was found intact. It had never been triggered. That detail is the one that refuses to leave. The Lord of Brezé built a trap at the center of a subterranean labyrinth, lost a man to whatever was already inside it, sealed the entrance, and declared the matter closed. Whatever he was afraid of had never come far enough in to find the trap he built for it. Number 8. The Whispering Well. Carved into the living rock beneath the monastery of San Juan de la Peña, sometime in the late 11th century, was a passage the monks called El Labyrinto del Pozo, the Labyrinth of the Well. The monastery itself is extraordinary. A Romanesque complex built directly into the underside of a mountain overhang in the province of Huesca, Aragon, founded in 1025 CE as one of the most significant royal monasteries in the Iberian Peninsula. What lay beneath it was treated, from an early date, as something altogether different from the sanctified stone above. The passage is referenced in the monastery's administrative records as a place of troubling resonance, an unusual phrase to encounter in a document concerned with the management of a religious house. Between 1089 and 1098, 4 monks entered the passage. 2 did not return. The other 2 came back, disordered in their speech, and were placed in the infirmary, where the records note only that they recovered their faculties slowly and would not describe what they had encountered. The abbot issued a formal prohibition in 1098, preserved in the diocesan archive at Jaca. It forbade entry to the passage after Vespers. 42 years later, a second abbot issued a stronger prohibition forbidding all entry, citing in the document that which answers from below. This is not a phrase drawn from folklore or legend. It appears in a formal ecclesiastical prohibition, signed and witnessed, meaning an abbot of San Juan de la Peña heard something in that passage respond, and considered the matter serious enough to put in writing. The passage entrance was subsequently incorporated into a stone wall. During restoration work in the 1960s, the blocked entrance was located, but not opened. What does a medieval abbot hear in the dark beneath his own monastery that makes him reach for a quill and write that which answers from below, as if naming it was the only power he had left? Number 7. The Spider's Lair. Dunluce Castle in County Antrim sits on a basalt stack above the North Atlantic, separated from the mainland by a narrow chasm, with genuine sea caves running beneath it into the cliff face. In the late 14th century, the Maquillan lords who held Dunluce extended the natural cave system into a deliberate network of passages. According to a Gaelic chronicle source drawn upon by the compilers of the Annals of the Four Masters, this was done to, in translation, give the creature its range. That phrase appears in the context of a construction decision. It is not a metaphor recorded in a poem or a saint's life. It is a record of intent, attached to a building project, written by someone who understood what they were documenting. The lower cave passages at Dunluce were not built for storage, or escape, or defense. They were built to provide range for something the Maquillans believed was already living in the rock beneath their castle. Between the construction and the early 15th century, 3 servants and a nobleman, identified in the annals as a man of the O'Neill family, entered the lower cave network and did not return. The cave entrance was subsequently sealed with rubble. Archaeological surveys of the Dunluce cave system have confirmed the presence of a rubble seal consistent with deliberate medieval closure. The same surveys identified passages extending further into the cliff than the natural cave formation should allow, suggesting human excavation that went deeper than any defensive purpose would require. No human remains have been recovered from the sealed sections. The archaeology does not tell us what the Maquillans built those passages for. It tells us only that the passages go further in than they should, that they were sealed from inside, and that the people who entered them did not come back out. Number 6. The Cursed Horde. In 1246, Prior Anselm de Gournay of Goldcliff Priory in Monmouthshire ordered the construction of a stone-lined underground passage beneath the priory's eastern precinct. The objects it was built to conceal had been recovered from a collapsed Roman structure on the Severn estuary. No inventory of those objects survives. Within a month of the sealing, 3 monks who had assisted in the work were dead. The prior himself died before the year was out, and his deathbed dictation, preserved in manuscript at the National Library of Wales, describes the passage as a mouth that does not close. Goldcliff Priory had been founded in 1113 CE as a Benedictine house dependent on Bec Abbey in Normandy, a well-administered institution with a centuries-long documentary record. The prior's deathbed language is, within that record, entirely singular. Benedictine administrators did not typically describe their building projects using images of consuming mouths. That this phrase appears in a final dictation, when a man would have little reason left for anything but precision, makes it more difficult to explain away. The priory was dissolved in the 15th century, earlier than most Welsh Benedictine houses. The dissolution document cites irregularities of the eastern precinct without elaborating on what those irregularities were. Earthwork surveys conducted by CADDW, the Welsh Historic Monuments Agency, identified a subsurface anomaly east of the priory footprint, consistent with a stone-lined chamber. It has not been excavated. The church administered Goldcliff Priory for over 2 centuries after the passage was sealed. Whatever decision was made at the dissolution, the eastern precinct was never opened, and the dissolution record chose a word that means something was wrong there without once saying what. The church knew. They simply decided that knowing was enough, and that opening it was not something they were prepared to do. Number 5. The Golem Guardian. In 1580, Rabbi Judah Lew ben Bezalel, the Maharal of Prague, and one of the most significant Jewish scholars of the 16th century, reportedly constructed a guardian from river clay to protect the Jewish quarter of the city. The Golem of Prague is among the most documented legends in European Jewish history, tied to a real man, a real place, and a real period of communal fear. What is discussed far less is the secondary structure, a deliberately confusing underground passage described in a 1611 Hebrew manuscript held at the Jewish Museum Prague, built not to protect the quarter from outsiders, but to contain the golem if it turned against the people who made it. The passage functioned architecturally as a tick, a container designed to loop a being that did not navigate as humans navigate, drawing it deeper rather than letting it find an exit. It was, in other words, a labyrinth engineered specifically for an inhuman mind, one that processed space and direction differently from any person who might accidentally enter it. The problem with building a maze for something that does not think as you do is that it becomes, for anything that does think as you do, considerably more dangerous than the thing it was built to trap. In October 1590, 2 city constables entered the Jewish quarter's underground passages in pursuit of a suspect. A municipal complaint lodged by their families, held in the Prague City Archives, records their names and the date of their entry. They were never found. The complaint was dismissed without finding. 3 years later, a municipal order was issued to collapse the passage, carried out by members of the Jewish community. A maze built to trap a creature, animated by sacred text, will do considerably worse things to an ordinary man who walks into it looking for someone else. Number 4. The Giant Serpent. In 1248, King Louis IX of France departed from the fortified port of Aigues-Mortes in the Camargue on the Seventh Crusade, one of the most heavily documented military and logistical undertakings of the medieval period. The town's walls and towers were still under construction at the time of departure. What the official crusade histories do not address is a network of passages beneath the salt marshes outside the walls, documented in a royal surveyor's report from 1251 as extending in a serpentine formation for over 400 meters, and noting that 3 laborers sent to measure its full extent did not complete their survey. Defensive underground passages are built straight. They follow the shortest line between 2 points because their purpose is transit, escape, or surprise. A serpentine passage, 400 meters long, that widens as it descends, serves none of those purposes. The Comptes Royaux. The royal accounts of Louis IX's reign record payment to surveyor Guillaume de Caux for work on the underground passages, and a separate payment to unnamed next of kin, consistent with compensation for workers' deaths, though no cause of death is specified. Camargue folklore, extensively documented by the 19th century ethnographer Frédéric Mistral, consistently describes a large creature associated with the salt marshes around the walls of Aigues-Mortes. Subsequent archaeological investigation of the area, using ground survey methods, confirmed the presence of underground passages extending beyond the walls, partially flooded, with measurements consistent with the 1251 surveyor's report. The lead investigator's notes, held at the Musée de la Camargue, describe one passage as shaped incorrectly for human construction, its curves following a logic that straight-line military engineering cannot account for. When a royal surveyor records payment to bereaved families and then describes a passage whose geometry does not conform to any known human purpose, the question is not whether something was down there, The question is what the passage was shaped around. Number 3. The Kraken's Reach. On May 18, 1291, the Crusader city of Acre fell to the Mamluk Sultan al-Ashraf Khalil after a siege of 43 days, ending the Christian presence in the Holy Land and closing one of the most consequential chapters in medieval history. Among the structures the Mamluks found intact beneath the city was a system of vaulted underground passages, the Crusaders called Viae Maris, the sea roads, connecting the harbor to the inner city through a subterranean network, that portions of which remain accessible to visitors in Akko today. The Sultan's soldiers explored most of it without incident. One branch, they refused to enter a second time. The Mamluk historian Ibn al-Furat, writing in the 1390s in his chronicle, Tariq ibn al-Furat, recorded that a company of 12 soldiers entered the lowest section of the harbor passages. 8 returned. The 4 who did not come back were never explained in the official record. The 8 who emerged described arms from the water reaching through a flooded lower section of the passage. Sultan Khalil ordered that branch sealed with rubble and lime mortar. He did not order it investigated. He ordered it closed. What the Mamluk records could not have known, and what Israeli Antiquities Authority excavations in Acre beginning in the 1990s have confirmed, is that the flooded lower passage network predates the Crusader city entirely. It was cut from the rock at a level below the current harbor waterline, and its origin and purpose have not been attributed to any known period of construction. The pre-Crusader sections have not been fully explored. The flooded passages beneath Acre remain sealed in their lower reaches, and the question of what the Crusaders found down there when they arrived, and chose to leave exactly as they found it, has never been formally addressed. Number 2. The Tomb Labyrinth. In the 2nd century BCE, the Greek historian Herodotus visited a structure near Hawara in the Fayum region of Egypt and wrote that it surpassed the pyramids. He described 12 roofed courts connected by winding passages, 3,000 chambers above and below ground, and a lower section that the Egyptian priests refused to show him, saying it contained the tombs of the kings who built it and the bodies of sacred crocodiles. The structure had been built by Pharaoh Amenemhat III around 1855 BCE. The Greek geographer Strabo visited it in 25 BCE and could not map it. By 1440 CE, the Arab historian Al-Makrizi was recording that Coptic Christians in the area refused to enter its ruins, calling it the inside from which one does not return. In 1433, a party of Venetian merchants attempting to survey the remains for potential salvage entered the surface ruins at Hawara. A letter from the expedition's leader, preserved in the Archivio di Stato di Venezia, records that 8 men went in. 3 came out. The 3 survivors would not describe what the others had gone toward. The letter requests no follow-up from the Merchants Guild. It reads, in its final lines, as a document written by someone who has decided not to know more. Flinders Petrie excavated Hawara in 1888 and 1889 and found almost nothing on the surface, an absence that puzzled him given the scale of ancient descriptions. In 2008, a ground-penetrating radar survey confirmed an intact subterranean structure beneath the site, extending over 300 meters, consistent in scale with what Herodotus described. The structure has not been excavated. No public explanation has been offered for why it remains unopened. The same labyrinth has generated missing persons accounts from Herodotus to medieval Arab chroniclers, to Venetian merchants, to modern archaeologists, who find nothing above ground and something vast below it. And every civilization that has reached this point in the process has made the same decision, to confirm that it is there, and then to walk away. Number 1. The Dragon's Rest. On January 1st, 1523, Grand Master Philippe Villiers de l'Isle Adam led the Knights Hospitallers out of Rhodes after a 6-month siege by Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, surrendering the island under a negotiated treaty that guaranteed their safe passage and the preservation of the city's contents. Before they left, They spent 11 days inside the lower fortifications, destroying specific sections of their own underground complex. Ottoman handover records held at the Topkapi Palace archive note the destruction with evident confusion, observing that the Christian knights were sealing their own passages against the terms of full surrender, and that Sultan Suleiman, who had every legal right to demand they stop, chose not to enforce it. The Knights Hospitaller had occupied Rhodes since 1309. In 2 centuries of occupation, their internal records document 11 individuals, including servants of 2 successive Grand Masters and the secretary of a visiting papal legate, who entered the lower complex on official business and were not subsequently located. Internal Hospitaller documents described by later historians of the Order reference a network of passages beneath the Street of the Knights, called Le Camere del Drago, the Dragon's Chambers, designed with a directional sequence requiring approximately 40 minutes to complete each turn, long enough to disorient any person who entered without the specific knowledge of how to proceed. It was not a defensive maze. It was a containing one. A sealed document was carried with the Order when they departed Rhodes and transferred to their new base on Malta. It is catalogued at the National Library of Malta under a description pertaining to the management of the lower rooms at Rhodes. It has never been published in full. At their fortress at Valletta, constructed in the 1570s, the Knights built an underground complex of near identical specification to the one they had left behind. Same dimensions, same restricted access protocols, suggesting that what the labyrinth was built to manage had not been left behind when they sailed. The Sovereign Military Order of Malta still exists. It maintains its archive. It has diplomatic status recognized by over 100 nations and permanent observer status at the United Nations. The document describing the management of the lower rooms in Rhodes remains catalogued and inaccessible, held by an institution that has survived crusades, sieges, and the dissolution of kingdoms, and which has never, in 5 centuries, offered a public account of what required managing. They knew what was in those chambers when they built them. They knew what was in them when they sealed them. And the fact that they rebuilt the same structure on a different island in a different sea tells you everything you need to know about whether they left it behind. If you want to see more videos like this, click the video on screen now and make sure to subscribe.